Today we learned that we added 230,000 private sector jobs last month. And that's good news. That means more packages. Right?
The president at a UPS facility on Friday. And yes, the jobs picture is looking up. Unemployment is the lowest it's been since March of 2009, just after President Obama took office. So it's good news if 8.8% unemployment can be considered good news. But as the recovery picks up steam, the budget showdown in Washington threatens to derail the progress that's been made. Here to make sense of it all, our roundtable with George Will, Paul Krugman, Nobel Prize-winning New York Times columnist, Tori Clark, the former Pentagon spokeswoman in the Bush administration, and David Ignatius of the Washington Post. Great to see you all here. So, the jobs numbers, good, right?
Yeah, it begins with a sigh because, look, this is better than not, right? Better than no jobs. But that unemployment is a funny number. Unemployment, you're only considered unemployed if you're actively looking for work. And so if you look, over the past year, the unemployment rate has come down a lot, significantly anyway, but that's basically almost all because fewer people are looking for work.
So where is it headed in terms of for people looking for work?
Well, it's still terrible. It's still a terrible job market. It's not deteriorating, but it's still there's still about 5 times as many people looking for jobs as there are job openings. And it's still, the average duration of unemployment hit a new record. So we're in a situation where things are not getting worse, or at least not getting worse in all dimensions anymore.
So is that good news? It's not getting worse?
It's not getting worse. Actually, the good news within the news is that there are 14,000 fewer people working for government in the United States as state and local governments shed jobs. But a corollary of what Paul just said is that when the economy picks up and people become encouraged to go back into seeking jobs, you could have the economy rising and unemployment rising simultaneously. We lost more jobs in this Great Recession than the last 4 recessions combined. Now, we have had for 28 months essentially zero interest rates. The quantitative easing, the printing of money that began in November, under this, the Federal Reserve Board, has been buying 70% of the new issues of Treasury debt. That ends in June. That probably distresses Paul.
I would just say that aftermath of a terrible financial crisis, and this was the worst financial crisis in the 1930s, is always a prolonged period of weak growth. And the tragedy is that Washington has given up on the jobs picture. It's not a failure of policy. I think the policies that were undertaken made things less bad than they would have been. But here we are with still terrible unemployment rate, 37 weeks. The average unemployed person is unemployed, and no interest in Washington about doing anything to create jobs.
So we were just speaking to Senators Sessions and Schumer. Did you hear anything from them that would lead to a slightly less grim outlook?
Well, only that you heard a reluctance on both sides to take the budget showdown off to the edge of a cliff. I didn't hear much enthusiasm for a shutdown from Senator Sessions on the Republican side. I think what's excited the White House about these numbers isn't the unemployment number per se, because as Paul says, there are all sorts of complicated factors that go into that, but the job growth number. And it does look as if the economy is finally beginning to generate jobs in the numbers that over time would bring the unemployment rate down and would get you back on a trajectory of more normal growth. We're not there yet, but I think people see, a light at the end of the tunnel, you could say. They at least see the tunnel.
I think the good thing from the two senators is neither one of them tried to score huge political points one way or the other, which is kind of the norm. And I thought it was very responsible and even-handed, which was good. But here's the failure of policy, I think. What will really get the private sector humming and hiring a lot of people is if they have predictability and certainty about things like regulatory regimes and are some of these trade agreements going to go through that we really need, because it is a global picture, not just a domestic one. And I know there's a lot going on, but nobody seems to be focusing on that. Not the administration, not Congress. And Paul's laughing, but
yeah, because that's not the reason businesses are not investing is that they have tons and tons of excess capacity. There's a very clear relationship historically between the amount of unemployment and the amount of business investment. When unemployment is high, when capacity is low, investment is low, there's nothing. All of this stuff about uncertainty is just a myth being made up to blame this on Obama.
There's not. There is nothing. It's not going to go unless it knows it can make money.
There's nothing in there. There's nothing in there. It's exactly what you'd expect.
Tory mentioned reforms, and tax reform is one of them. I mean, it looks like this week there was this whole issue with Jeffrey Immelt, the president's advisor, and allegedly paying absolutely no tax and having made billions of dollars in profit, the company. It was okay, he took advantage of the system, but is it right? Does that need to be conformed?
Look, it's an old axiom that what's alarming in Washington isn't what's done that's illegal, but what's done that's legal. No one is accusing GE of doing anything other than taking advantage of the Baroque tax code that we have produced over time. Mitch Daniels, the governor of Indiana, says, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a tax code that looks as though someone designed it on purpose? They designed a tax code that has produced the following interesting number. According to Investors Business Daily, 975 people work in the tax department of GE, just trying to mine the tax code for advantage.
It doesn't look good, though, does it, the optics of this?
No, I have to say that Obama has got a pretty bad record now. He picked, Alan Simpson to co-head the debt commission, who turned out to be given to making some rather strange remarks. As his advisor on the economy, he managed to pick the head of a corporation that's managing not to pay any taxes. And look, we do need tax reform. But the biggest obstacle to tax reform right now is that any reasonable tax reform is going to raise taxes on some people because you're going to close some loopholes. And what we have is the right wing of the Republican Party, the Grover Norquist type, saying no taxes on anybody should ever go up. And we can't have a tax reform that consists solely of cutting taxes. We have to have one that levels the taxes. So at the moment, tax reform is just not on the agenda, realistically, because we have no agreement on that.
Do you think that President Obama is as involved in, for instance, the budget battles that are going on in Congress as you would like to see him?
In classic Obama fashion, he is involved but trying to conceal his hand. He's the most reticent chief executive I can remember. For example, yesterday, Saturday, he was on the phone both to John Boehner, the House Speaker, and to Harry Reid, the Senate Majority Leader, trying to talk about the details of the compromise they hope will be coming this week. On the question that Paul is raising, whether we're ever going to get to the point where we're seriously talking about tax simplification, tax changes that would lead to better budget balance and reduction in the deficits that worry everybody, I think this White House is getting ready for a process. I think it could actually come quite soon by June, July, in which the White House, which has been reticent, silent on all this, will begin to roll out some ideas similar to those that were in the Simpson-Bowles Deficit Commission. And I think we could have this summer a big and very important debate about how to get these numbers better.
One thing we didn't get to talk about with the senators was the really big cuts or the big reforms that have to be made in entitlements, and also on the Pentagon. Where do you think big cuts can be made in the Pentagon budget?
Man, it's like the morbidly obese patient. It's almost, where do you start? It really is. And God bless anyone, Rumsfeld, Gates, and others who are trying. It is very, very hard. They've made some significant cuts, and there is plenty of waste in that place. Anytime you have 2 or 3 million employees, depends on how you count them, there is a lot of waste. But that wouldn't be the first place I would start. Well, and most people would argue that's not the one that's going to make the big difference. And whether or not these folks up the street are really serious is if they tackle the major entitlement programs. Republicans say they're going to, yet to be seen.